Rick Stream, running for St. Louis County Executive. This is the County Executive Debate on KTRS and KTRS.com. Here's your moderator, McGraw-Milhaven.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first ever televised radio debate in the history of St. Louis County. It's an open seat. Election day is November 4th. St. Louis County Council member Steve Stanger is to my left, and he is running against Missouri House Rep Rick Stream, both of them here in studio for the full hour. We will be taking a couple of questions from the text line. You want a question or ask a question, 84126, and I have complete discretion over any and all questions. So if you text your question to 84126, I'll be looking at them throughout the day. I want to give a special thanks to KTRS, who has limited interruptions. I also want to thank everybody at the First Rule Film and Broadcast Studios, the 16th floor of the University Tower, who have been gracious enough to help us with the TV side. You can certainly watch us at KTRS.com. You can watch us at STLtoday.com and the Opinion tab. You can watch and listen to us on the radio and download the app. St. Louis County Council member Steve Stanger, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
House Rep Rick Stream, thank you for joining us.
McGraw, thanks for having me.
We're going to have a closing comment from each of you later on in the hour. But first, I want to start with you, Steve Stanger. Ferguson has been in not only the news nationally but internationally, being mentioned on the floor of the UN. Since the Ferguson riots and since Officer Wilson's shooting, there's been a criticism that Governor Nixon has really not been around. Charlie Dooley has really not been there. Mayor Slay has not been around. You want to be the leader of St. Louis County. How do we move forward? What would you do in a Stanger administration that would get us moving forward with St. Louis County and this whole Ferguson story?
Well, the first thing that needs to happen, and we see some of it happening now, but an open and active dialogue has to occur. We need to hear and gather input from all the stakeholders in the community. And this is really for our whole county, but particularly in the area of Ferguson. And, we've seen a myriad of issues come to the forefront, and those issues need to be discussed in as many public forums as they can be discussed. And then action needs to be taken based on those discussions. And like I said, we're seeing some of those discussions, and those discussions have been productive. Some of the areas that I think we're going to really need to look strongly into are areas of economic development and equal opportunity for everyone in St. Louis County, municipal court reform, and there needs to be also an audit of our policing.
Everyone talks about jobs, and you mentioned it there. How do you get economic development going in the St. Louis County?
Well, and what I've been talking about since my campaign began, and it's based on my thoughts from before my campaign began, is developing an Office of Economic Empowerment, a division of economic empowerment, community empowerment within St. Louis County government. And this would be from a restructuring of St. Louis County government at no additional cost to the budget. And it would be a department that would be focused and bringing resources to bear on the very issue that we're talking about, economic opportunity, equal opportunity. It would be a department that would marshal the resources from our Department of Highways and Traffic, which, as we'll talk about, I'm sure later, I'm going to rename both symbolically and practically to the Department of Transportation. We need to think differently about transportation and public transportation. And then economic development itself, thoughtful economic development for all areas of St. Louis County, including North County. Also, we have a Children's Services Fund. We have a Children's Services Fund that could bring great resources to bear. This is a fund that was voted in by taxpayers back in 2008. And it has been very sluggish in getting its funds out. It currently has 2 years of funding in it, which amounts to about $80 million of funding that needs to reach the children that it's designated to serve. And this is a designated fund, and this is one of those kinds of funds where it's a good thing to spend that money down because it's solely devoted to children 0 to 19 years of age.
Rick Stream, in a administration, how do you get this county moving forward and get over this Ferguson situation?
Well, thanks, McGraw, again, for having me. I think if anybody believes that Ferguson doesn't have a negative impact on our county, they're not paying attention. It's clearly a situation that has gone nationwide and worldwide in a negative light for St. Louis County. So we need to address it right away. And I've been in North County as well as all over the county since I filed back in March. I've met with a lot of the elected representatives and people on the street, not only in Ferguson, but across North County, talking to them, listening to them about the issues that are most important to them. I think when we want to start turning the county around, we have to talk about job creation, economic development. We've got to create a climate in St. Louis County where business wants to come here, grow jobs, hire people so they can take care of their families, their communities, and their schools. I mean, if we want to improve the quality of life for everybody in St. Louis County, we have to make sure that we have policies in place that allow business to come in and grow and hire people. The other aspect, major aspect, I think, of turning this county around is that education. We've got an education system that up in North County is not doing as well as it should. Some of the school districts are okay, but many of them are not. We need to improve the educational quality for the children of our city, our county, because if they don't get a good education, they're not going to be able to get jobs that we want to bring into St. Louis County. So, economic development, job creation. I think we definitely have to look at the policing methods, sentencing, the warrants that are being issued for traffic violations, and of course housing. And I have told people across this county, and including in North County, that the minute I'm elected, the next day, November the 5th, I'll be working on establishing committees that will address all of these issues so that we can hit the ground running on January 1st.
You mentioned policing. Go ahead.
May I just make a few comments real quickly? Rick just talked about economic development, and something that I would note is during his years down in Jefferson City for the past 8 years, the state legislature has failed us completely with respect to an economic package for our area and region. As far as education goes, while he was budget chairman, just in 2014, education was underfunded by $600 million by a formula that was set up by his own party. And with respect to something that's really important and that we don't necessarily think of as economic development, but we should, and that we don't think about, I think that the legislature failed to think about, is Medicaid expansion. Rick Stream turned down federal funds that were there for Missouri, that were there for St. Louis County. Billions of dollars were turned away. It left 260,000 Missourians, 300,000 St. Louisans. And these are St. Louisans that certainly reside in North St. Louis County and all over the county. In 2014 alone, this package would have resulted in $238 million in hospital payments. In St. Louis County from 2015 to 2022, it results in a loss of 4,500 jobs and $2.3 billion, billion with a B, in wages lost because of turning down this federal money.
Rick Stream, go ahead.
Yeah, unfortunately, Steve is wrong on virtually everything he just said. In the 8 years I've been in the legislature, the Missouri legislature has passed numerous proposals, Quality Jobs Act, Missouri Works, under Republican governors and Democrat Governor Jay Nixon, that have increased job growth in Missouri as a whole and in St. Louis County specifically. The 700 jobs that were announced at Boeing last week were the result of legislation that we passed last December to bring jobs to Missouri for Boeing. So, and in fact, I think if you look across the state, there have been tens of thousands of jobs created under the Quality Jobs Act and Missouri Works, and in St. Louis County alone, there's been 6,000 jobs created. As far as education, what Steve said is just completely untrue. We increased funding in education this year to the highest level it's ever been in the history of the state of Missouri, put in an additional $278 million into the foundation formula. The governor has withheld a lot of that money. We also put money in for specific purposes to help the school districts of St. Louis County so they could do better with the kids that they have in their schools. If we are interested in trying to improve the quality of education for our students, we need to fund it in the areas where it's needed the most. And I, as budget chairman, the last 2 years have specifically funded programs to help the students in the North County school districts.
Would you support Medicaid expansion?
I have not voted for it. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't believe we should expand the welfare system in this state. And it's federal, by the way, it's federal taxpayer dollars. This is not free money, and it's not going to, we're going to have to pay a lot in the state of Missouri eventually for it. The Medicaid system in the state of Missouri is broken. It's broken badly. A lot of Democrats in my district have told me, don't expand Medicaid until we fix the system in the state of Missouri. That's Governor Nixon's job, to fix the Medicaid system.
McGraw, what I've told you, the economic impact to St. Louis County is what we're talking about. And that is the true economic impact to St. Louis County. There's nothing false in that. And with respect to funding the education budget, the budget for education in Missouri has been underfunded for 5 straight years that Rick Stream has been involved in the budget process.
All right, Rick, do you want to respond to that so we can move on?
Sure. The reason it's
he really needs to answer the question, is our formula fully funded over the last 5 years?
It is not fully funded because we have had an economic downturn, but we have
no
not
further
cut funding.
questions.
We have not, well, this is not a trial. This is not a courtroom. This is a debate. We have not had any decrease in funding. We have increased funding for education every year in spite of the fact that we've had an economic downturn.
I want to get back to Ferguson, and you mentioned policing and policing tactics, Rick Stream. In Beverly Hills, they have 574 people. They wrote 4,300 tickets. Uplands Park, 445 people. They wrote 2,000 tickets. Floridale Hills, 822 people, 3,000 tickets. I can go on and on. Calverton Park, 1,300 people, 7,500 tickets. There was a story on Channel 5 where they found a memo from I want to say Edmondson, that said that the mayor wrote a memo to police officers, hey, you need to write more tickets. How do you solve that problem?
It is a problem because a lot of the police departments, some of them, I would say, I don't say a lot, but there are a number of police departments that are surviving strictly on writing tickets. In fact, I think some of the small municipalities are surviving based on writing tickets, traffic tickets. And that is wrong, and we need to address it. We need to stop it, put a cap on it, turn the money back to education in some different way. I've met with the Arch City Defenders who have been dealing with the number of tickets that have been issued and the fact that people have outstanding warrants because they can't pay the tickets. I think I've actually put in a call to the Supreme Court of Missouri to try to get the letter that they sent up there expedited because they can change that so that nobody can go to jail if they can't pay their traffic tickets. That's a good first step. But I do think that the policing techniques, especially when it deals with traffic tickets, needs to be reined in and curtailed to a lot of extent. And I think if you've got 90 municipalities and 60 police departments, you need to look at ways that you can save money and provide better policing, better training without charging the people with traffic tickets.
Are you for or against red light cameras in St. Louis County?
I'm against it.
You're against it?
Yes, I am.
Steve Stanger, how do you fix this problem of these towns that are so small in population yet write so many tickets?
Well, there are some efforts underway, and I'm very much in support of those efforts. There's a rule in the state of Missouri that deals with municipal court reform, and that's Rule 37. It's a Supreme Court rule, and that rule is being closely examined, and it's a rule that I'm familiar with as an attorney. And that rule can be utilized to handle some of the issues that we're talking about. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But with respect to the municipalities, I think that the numbers that you've quoted are ridiculous. And it's a situation.
Are you questioning my numbers?
No.
Oh.
I'm saying I think that the sheer magnitude of those numbers are just ridiculous. I think that that's a situation that absolutely has to be remedied. Unfortunately for us in St. Louis County, it's very difficult to do that from the county executive's office because we don't have direct line authority over the municipalities. It's not that the government system is not set up in that way. However, we can work with our state legislators to put some caps on that situation, revenue caps. That's one way to handle it. Another way to handle it is to actually look at the practices that the municipal courts are taking part in, and that would be done through Rule 37, and that deals with fines and court costs. Now, in St. Louis County, we also have a municipal court system, and we're looking at that very issue right now. We've had a fine system and a court system where we have court costs of $62 roughly. We've had that for about the past 10 years. But we also have an ability to pay statute. And what I'd like to see is an ability to pay an ability to pay provision be placed in Rule 37, where judges would have discretion, where people don't have the ability to pay, where their fines and court costs could be reduced. And that's what we're looking at right now in St. Louis County. We already have that ordinance in St. Louis County, and in St. Louis County, it's a question of whether our county attorney and whether our county judges are uniformly applying that ordinance.
Do you want to comment, or can I move on?
You can move on.
Okay, good. All right. Maria Chappelle Nadal is a Democratic member down in Jefferson City who has come out in favor of you and supporting you. And in your commercials, Rick Stream, you say that you will reach across party lines. Can you name for me 1, 2 Democrats that you voted for in the past?
Locally, yes, in my city elections. You want the names
Sure,
specifically?
yeah.
Sure, like Paul Ward and Wallace Ward. They're African-American members who I, grew up with.
And they're running for Kirkwood City Council?
They have. Wallace was on the Kirkwood School Board, and Paul was on the City Council.
And those are Democratic?
Democrats.
Republican elections? Those aren't open? Aren't open?
They're not. No, those are municipal elections. They're not Republican Democrat, but they're clear Democrats.
Okay, gotcha. But are there any Democrats in a election? Claire McCaskill, or President Obama, Jay Nixon. Are there any Democrats that you think of that you've reached across party lines and supported and or voted for?
I can't think of any at this point.
Steve Stanger, you've talked about reaching across party lines. Republicans you've voted for in the past.
I've been a Democrat my whole life, and I've voted Democrat. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't work across party lines, though. Colleen Wassinger and Greg Quinn on the council are extraordinarily dear friends of mine. And they're friends of mine that I've worked with. I have a very close working relationship with both of them. And we have stood up to the administration together, the current administration, numerous times. In fact, where we've seen some of our 4-3 votes on the council, it's been because of the votes that they've given. And I've supported many of their measures on the council as well. When we had our budget crisis, our claimed budget crisis in 2011, it was Colleen Wassinger and I who sat down and hammered out how we would fix the budget. And I did the same thing with Greg Quinn. So
the answer again is, have you voted for any Republicans at the ballot box?
I'd vote Democrat. But once again, you asked also about support.
Right, but I mean, you've never pulled the lever for a Republican.
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Let's talk about Bob McCullough while we have time before the other break. Bob McCullough is the central figure in this Ferguson situation. Rick Stream, your comments have been sort of taken out of context and taken in context. And once and for all, what are your thoughts with Bob McCullough? Should he step down? Should he continue to do the job he was elected to do?
Well, first of all, this election is not about Bob McCullough. It's about Steve Stanger and Rick Stream. So, Bob McCullough lives in Kirkwood. He and I have met occasionally. He had a chance to step down. The Governor Nixon had a chance to appoint a special prosecutor. Neither one of the men made a decision to do that. I've called for a special prosecutor when a police officer kills a person in the future. I've not asked for Bob McCullough to step down in this particular case. I think when you have a grieving family, and as you know, McGraw, I'm a father who lost an 18-year-old daughter many years ago, and I understand what the Brown family is going through. How difficult and how terrible it is a time for them, and I continue to pray for that family. And when you have a grieving family in a community up in North County that asked for Mr. McCullough to step aside, I have said that I would have thought that he might have considered that, because we've seen what's happened since then. The community continues to protest, although I think a lot of people who are protesting are not from St. Louis metropolitan area, but there have been 80,000 negative stories written about St. Louis County since Ferguson, and we have to do something to turn the image of St. Louis County around. I have worked with many of the elected officials in North County in the legislature over the last 8 years, and many of them have endorsed me because they trust me. They know that I'm a man who is of my word. I'm honest. I have integrity. That's what they've said about me. I have an open door. I listen to their concerns. I try to help when I can. If I can't, I tell them why. This is the type of crossing over the racial and party lines that is needed to heal this county.
By insinuating that a special prosecutor could be appointed, are you not insinuating that he can't do the job he was elected for?
I'm not insinuating that at all. What I'm saying is the perception is that it's not going to be fair to certainly the North County area. Now, and this is not a problem that's just in St. Louis County. If you go across the state, and that's why we probably need some legislation, when a police officer kills somebody, I think there should be an independent investigation just to make sure that there's nothing that should be done. There was nothing not illegal, but just improperly done. Because in many cases, the county prosecutors work directly and closely with the police officers, and they're the ones that they're now expecting to investigate. So I think in this case, it would have made sense for him to step aside simply to calm things down and start the healing in the community.
Some of the people who have supported you have come out and said that if Officer Wilson is not indicted, there very well could be riots in the streets. If, regardless of what the grand jury comes back, will you support that decision one way or the other?
If the grand jury, whatever the grand jury rules is that's the grand jury's decision, I will support it.
Steve Stanger.
May I respond to all that?
Go ahead.
I want to start with what I think you're alluding to, McGraw, and that's Maria Chappelle-Nadell's comments. Now, this woman appears in Rick Stream's ad, and she's a state senator from Missouri. And while we saw all of the heightened activity going on in Ferguson, she was really out there leading the charge and saying that if you thought yesterday was something, wait till you see what she said, a not guilty verdict come back. This is going to look, essentially saying this is going to look like nothing. Those comments essentially incite exactly what we're trying to avoid, and I don't think that those comments are appropriate and what we need. So on the one hand, I think Rick is calling for some kind of calm by having Bob McCullough step down, but then has Maria Chappelle-Nadell sort of the one of the leaders of what I think we don't want to see in his ads. Now, going to Bob McCullough, at a time like this where we are in crisis, this is not the time to set principles aside, to set the rule of law aside. We have developed these systems that we have in place, procedures that we have in place, laws that we have in place over time, and we can't just throw them out for public opinion. It can't work that way. It leads to a destabilization of our community. Bob McCullough has been the prosecuting attorney for 24 years in St. Louis County. He's been elected multiple times. He is our county prosecutor. There's no legal reason to recuse him, and he has not been recused to this point. I have no authority to ask him to step down. I have been asked, and it's been demanded of me. I've been given deadlines by noon tomorrow that I'm to denounce him. And that's just not something that I am prepared to do. I don't think this is the time to equivocate. I think that's what we need right now is real leadership that is going to pull us through this. Leadership that can be depended upon and leadership that has principle and that just does not, you don't bend those basic principles. Even though a community is in pain and does need to be healed, I think that the healing process in the mid and long term is much more aided by following our principles. And we also, just as a stopgap measure, we also have a concurrent federal investigation that's going on that will ensure that if anyone has any doubts, that things are being handled properly.
That is Steve Stanger. He's St. Louis County Council member Steve Stanger. He wants to be your next county executive, and so does Missouri House Representative Rick Stream. It's the St. Louis County debate here on the Big 550 KTRS. I want to stay with that thought for just a moment. I'll go back to you, Steve Stanger, and I'll let Rick Stream respond. And that is, let's talk about leadership, because there were businesses in St. Louis County that were told the looters are coming for your store, and the police were told we are not allowed to defend your property. How do you get any business to open up a store in St. Louis County when the police are told they cannot protect the property in which they are paying taxes for? How do you solve that problem, and how does that not happen again? Steve Stanger.
We're going to do
Go ahead.
now before the break?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, certainly. Well, first, I think that there was clearly, on the county side, a leadership gap. You mentioned it earlier. The county executive has within his authority the ability to declare a state of emergency for St. Louis County. And when that happens, the St. Louis County executive has control over the police department. That would not have been a call that I would have ever made. So in the event of future unrest, if I were to be county executive, I would declare a state of emergency. And my directive would be protect life and property. It has to be. And it's exactly for the reason that you stated. If we are going to have a future in the Ferguson area, in North County, we just cannot have that situation. Now, it really starts before you declare the state of emergency. The first thing that needs to happen is you need to get the stakeholders together, and you need to essentially get out ahead of it and be proactive. And frankly, the best way to put it is you need to get people signed on board to peace. I mean, that's the bottom line. And in doing that, you'll know who's on the same page and who's not. Secondly, if I could just add really quickly, you also have to have effective lines of communication. Without effective lines of communication and protocols, there are going to be screw-ups along the way. You have to know how to handle those situations, and you have to have protocols and procedures within that group of stakeholders so everyone can act in a peaceful, nonviolent way. And you see leadership at every level being led by the county executive toward a peaceful resolution of the situation.
Rick Stream, how do you solve that problem from businesses being told that police are not going to protect their property?
Well, first of all, that was a terrible order to give. Life and property has to be protected because property is part of life. So I certainly would never have issued any type of order like that. We need to protect our businesses. We need to send a message to around this metropolitan area and the nation and the world, for that matter, that business is welcome in St. Louis County. It's going to be protected, and that we're going to provide a climate where they can grow and establish jobs. So I think that first of all, you need to make sure that that you have a county executive who has proven leadership, number one. I've got 42 years of leadership and management experience, going back to when I was a naval officer, commissioned in 1972. I've been a budget project manager for 29 years, school board, 12 years, president, 2 years, vice chairman and chairman of the House Budget Committee in the Missouri Legislature. I've worked with Republicans, independents, Democrats, members of the African American community consistently all of those years, especially in the legislature. The lines of communication are already open between me and people all over this county. Yesterday I was in all 4 areas of the county, south, west, central, and north, meeting people, Democrats, independents, and Republicans, and the reception I'm getting is great. They want to see somebody with proven leadership skills come into this job so that we can improve the quality of life for all the people of St. Louis County.
That's Rick Stream, Missouri House Representative, also St. Louis County Council Member Steve Stanger. The St. Louis County Executive Debates 2014 continues on the Big 550.